The third speaker is contestant 309, whose title is Kleine Krümchen.
Most of my early childhood memories were formed in the presence of my German grandma, Omi. Now, I know what you're all thinking. I'm not as tall as most Germans, but I assure you it's true. Now, I love my Omi. I truly do, and I always will. But some things about having a German grandma are simply frightening. For example, as a 6-year-old kid, waking up and hearing, "Woher auf, Frühstück Zeit," which surprisingly only means wake up, it's time for breakfast, screamed at you at 6 o'clock in the morning. That's enough to make you pinken in the Hosen. I'd rather not say what that means. But there is one saying that will always remain ingrained in my mind. Kleine Krümchen. No crumbs. You see, my grandma, growing up in rural Germany, near starvation, truly understood and stressed the importance of never leaving any crumbs. She admonished us always to finish our food. Yet, by the time that I learned to faithfully collect every scrap on my dish, I realized that this problem extended beyond my own plate. Not finishing what we begin is a mistake that too many of us come to regret. And we can explore this problem by first examining the leaders of our nation and how they failed to finish the people's business. Second, taking an introspective look at ourselves and how we fail to recognize or consciously ignore our unfinished business before third, and finally, understanding how we can profit from finishing what we start. Now, we Americans, privileged to be headed by a government with democratic ideals, take pride in knowing that we can agree to disagree, that we can stand up for what we believe in and let no one knock us down. However, it is when that pride spreads to the decision makers of our country, our Congress, and it prevents them from achieving goals that we as a nation set out to achieve, that not finishing becomes inevitable. And perhaps the most problematic manifestation of our nation's inability to finish is the process known as filibustering. And it's been happening for years. In fact, Huey Long, the fiery senator from Louisiana, once gave a filibuster speech that lasted 15 hours and 30 minutes. In this speech, he recited Shakespeare, gave shrimp and oyster recipes, and even made jokes about pot licking. Whatever that is. However, this is just not a phenomenon of the past. Political scientist Barbara Sinclair explains. In the 1960s, she finds, extended debate-related problems, or filibustering, took place in about 8% of major legislation. But in 2009, the percentage of bills that weren't debated due to filibusters skyrocketed. In fact, over 76 bills and 290 pieces of legislation were sent to the Senate and simply sat there. Unfinished business. Now, recently, President Barack Obama signed into law the health care reform bill. And you know, it's not about being Democrat or Republican. It's about finishing what took over 14 months to accomplish. Senator Edward Kennedy devoted 47 years of his life trying to provide health care for all Americans. Sadly, he died last August of brain cancer. But when health care reform finally was passed, his son Patrick, a congressman from Rhode Island, visited his grave. A news reporter later found the note that he left. It read, that your unfinished business is now done. Just as Senator Kennedy, we must all work to leave no crumbs behind. Now, as pleasant as it may be to place the blame solely onto those who lead us, With a bit of introspection, we all should realize that each and every one of us are at fault for our society's problems as well. We're simply not willing to work anymore. A recent study conducted by Columbia University exposed the prevalence of procrastination in our nation. The studies find that on a daily basis, nearly 70% of Americans are confronted by procrastination. Now, of this 70%, 20% have chronic procrastination, meaning they honestly can't control not finishing. But as for the other 50%, you know who I mean. Well, we don't have much of an excuse. Like when we try to convince our bosses and teachers that Mark Twain really was right when he said, "Never put off until tomorrow what you can do the day after tomorrow." The only problem is, tomorrow never comes. Perhaps, though, a greater lesson can be learned. A lesson that I learned my freshman year. You see, I was a part of this year-long life skills class, where I, along with 52 other African American males, led by our teacher, attempted to break through the academic achievement gap. We felt as Oxford University alumni Pierre Clark did. We didn't want to be another African American male statistic. However, led by my teacher, I soon came to realize that many of my classmates had grown up in incomplete families. Either their mother or father decided not to finish their vows. By the time they had entered the high school education system, their calls for help had gone unheard, but nonetheless, they were allowed to move on, despite their unfinished understanding in a plethora of subjects. I mean, it got so bad where a large majority of my classmates couldn't finish a book meant for middle school students. And on December 21st of 2007, I truly learned what it meant not to finish. You see, on that day, one of my classmates, Vernon Edens, went to the nearby middle school to pick up his younger brother and was ambushed by a group of gang members. Driven by hatred toward another race, the gang members got out of their car with guns drawn, chased Vernon down the street, and shot him twice in the back. Minutes later, he lay dead in the arms of his former middle school teacher. He was 14 years old. It took me about 2 weeks to come to terms with the fact that Vernon wouldn't be finishing the 9th grade with me. I would never see him finish another football game or hear him finish another joke. I realized that each and every day that you and I live on, that we are presented with opportunities to finish what we start, is one day that Vernon will never have. And so if there is just one thing that you take with you today, let it be this. Finish as much as you can, as long as you can. Leave no crumbs behind, and help others do so as well. Because there will always be reasons as to why we can't. We can always compose complaints saying that it's too hard. We could say that every single thing in this world stands in our way. And you know what? We'd be right. But if there's just one lesson that we can learn from Vernon's story, it's a lesson that should inspire us to find no reasons as to why we can't, to compose no complaints, to leave no crumbs behind. And it's a message that is perhaps best exemplified by NYU President Dr. John Sexton. You see, in a speech given at Emory University, Dr. Sexton describes a predicament he was faced with while teaching at St. Brendan's High School in Brooklyn. Now, Dr. Sexton, who was also attending college at the time, took a job mentoring the young girls at the school. He took daughters of policemen, firefighters, and sanitation workers who were expected to be home after school to help clean the house, but not expected to go to college, and he helped them achieve their potential. I mean, what was once unthinkable for these girls turned to hopes, turned to dreams, turned real. However, this is where the predicament arose. You see, Dr. Sexton was admitted into Harvard Law, one of his lifelong dreams. However, when he requested deferment so that he could finish his business with these young women, the admissions committee told him he'd have to attend college the following year or not go at all. And so, Dr. Sexton said, "It looks like I'm going to have to give up on Harvard, at least for now, because I am not going to break the promise I made to these girls. I will finish what I started." And by the girls' senior year, every one of them was able to go to college on scholarship. You see, Dr. Sexton did what we all should strive to do every day. He left no crumbs on his plate of life, and we all have unfinished business, whether it be finishing an assignment for school, following through on promises once made, or thanking a grandparent. Whatever it may be, I urge you to take my grandmother's advice, to kleine Krummchen, leave no crumbs. And Grandma, unfertigen geschafft werden jetzt gemacht. Your unfinished business is now